Okay, we're live with Mr. Wright and Mrs. Dr. Breck, and we're talking about the book Sanction, Volume 1 tonight. Greetings, Mr. Wright.
Hello there. Good to hear from you both. This has been a long time coming, as we're all three avid readers of Roman McClay's work, and I'm sure we can all come from different vantage points on this.
Yes, it's going to be a very interesting discussion, and primarily what I would like to do is influence the reader or the listener to this broadcast to become a reader of the book. So, Sanction Volume 1 is one of those weird, notorious books that have been driven underground. Mr. Wright has the whole deal. And we are in talks to buy our hard copy too, but we're also in talks to republish it. And so why should you read Sanction? Because Sanction is the only work covering the idea of embodied AI. It is the most profound work of science fiction written since, I don't know, probably.
I would say ever.
She says ever. It's the most profound work of science fiction ever. And it really is, because it's a mixture of science fiction, philosophy, and drama, high drama, and so it's not just one high culture. Yeah.
Viniculture.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And we're probably leaving a lot out. But just look at the size of the book. It is a formidable read. And so we're gonna go into the books but why do you think offhand people should read it, Mr. Wright?
Well, there's a number of angles I could take with this. One of which is, you'll hear of banned books, quote unquote. And I find that those banned books are really banned light, L-I-T-E. They're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Sanction truly is a banned book. I mean, the dialogue around it was swept under the rug with a quickness, and then so much so that even Goodreads, Amazon yanked them all. But funny enough, Roman McClay's profile is still there. It's just devoid of any works. And then Goodreads itself, if you dig deep, you'll find Sanction. The name is Sanction. It's Sanction Volume 1, and then 2 and 3, not a book, and it's in all caps. So with that, if you are curious, and I'm one of those people, if I'm told I can't read something, or then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read it. So there's that piece of it. The other piece, like you mentioned, with the AI bit, the embodied AI, which I do believe you touch on in your own works, albeit from a different angle. That was pretty forward thinking. I don't think anyone quite touched upon that in the way that McClay did. And in fact, he advanced the idea that AI, artificial intelligence, cannot possibly make that leap into all the excesses and glory that people talk about AI today in 2026. It's not possible unless that AI is embodied within the biological framework of a human being, or a quasi-human, or what have you, an anthropomorphic sort of avatar. So I find that utterly fascinating. This was written back in 2019, I believe. The man wrote 3 million words and then edited that then down to 1.5 million. It'd be very interesting to see what he calls a bunch of something like a bunch of just incomprehensible, hallucinatory, extraneous words. It'd be interesting to see what that stuff looks like. But alas, he's no longer here. He made his choice. We can probably get into some of that later. So, unless somebody finds that hard drive, it's all unknown. But it's a real mystery, these books. Roman McClay himself, in his interviews, had indicated that he felt very strongly that there's a sort of a mystery behind being an author where you yourself don't quite understand in full what it is you're writing. There's a subconscious thing going on. It's very stream of consciousness. You could see where he was really battling different ideas, and some of them bested him. And then some of them are just kind of fun, like his foray into wine culture, just kind of a sub piece. There's a lot there. There's the mythologies of the world in there. There's the Haitian rebellion comes up. There's just these odds and ends throughout the course of these 3 massive books, of which I've only completed the first. And so with that, I mean, if you're into literary obscura, Roman McClay's Sanction is a good way to go.
Okay, Leanna, do you want to talk about why?
Yeah, I find it, in the book, when you're reading the book, you get that he reveres Moby Dick.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. Yes,
and
you made connections for me with that. Yeah.
He reveres Moby Dick, and you get that because he goes on the same tangents that you read in Moby Dick, only they center around wine. And he talks about Moby Dick, and he will eventually, reference a whale or two. But the wine tangents are so reminiscent of the chapters that talk about whales in Moby Dick that have absolutely nothing to do with the story.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing to do. You could take those chapters out and republish the book and it would not change the book.
Right. Do you like those detours? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Yeah.
Clearly he enjoyed Melville. I told you I read the book. I didn't enjoy it, but I read it. Because you're supposed to read Melville.
Well, not to interrupt you again, but to continue with what you're saying, he literally expressed a kinship for Melville.
He did.
He literally claims like there is a lineage there between him and Melville, and it's a very profound connection he has with Melville. So in other words, this is his Moby Dick, and he's writing it the way Melville wrote Moby Dick, or the way, to use in a broader analogy, Coppola created Apocalypse Now, the movie.
Yeah.
And he's putting it together as if he were under serious stress and under very difficult conditions. But the formula is the same. So, go ahead.
The couple of things that I noticed with the Melville and McClay connection, there's innumerable examples, firstly, but one of them was that McClay is said to have perhaps sold 3,000 copies, I believe, of his book. Melville himself sold 1,000 in his lifetime, and that's heralded now as perhaps the greatest American novel. Leanna might bucket that a little bit, but not to put you on the spot, it is a tough read. Yeah. But the same is true with McClay. 3,000 copies, and who knows how many folks actually read it, Some just wanted to see what the hullabaloo is about, the red pillars, like, this is some sage with the jackhammer, but did they actually read it? And then promptly discarded it or put it up on eBay while the going is hot. But it makes me wonder, are we in fact those very few readers that have been drank deeply of this work that could very well down the road be considered a great literary work, much like Melville's, right, Moby Dick. Right. And then the other thing I noticed is his first chapter. Well, so you've got the prologue, which is the Roman McClay being the AI. He's introduced as the author of the works. The Lyndon McCloud, the actual author of the book, he wanted to distance himself and make it a thing of a figment or a thing of AI's doing. So this AI, Roman McClay wrote it, but then that first chapter, Lyndon McCloud is introduced, who is the protagonist of sorts.
Yes.
Anti-hero, I guess you could say. And he's on an oil rig, and his combating with the oil, like the oil itself, is brings to mind a whale. I mean, the way he talks about it is that he is he's continuing where Melville left off, and that the oil is the oil under the earth is some sort of a Leviathan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also can connect that opening sequence, if you will, with Younger's Storm of Steel, where he's describing battle. And they both have the ability to describe combat of different types, or human striving of different types, very accurately, or maybe just poetically, or what have you. He and Younger share that. I'm sure he read Younger somewhat, maybe not, but no, I said I'm sure he read Younger. Well, you will need to read Storm of Steel. But in any case, the point of it is, I just see that similarity of him being able to describe what he's been through in such terms, from such a maybe impartial is the wrong word, but definitely artistic perspective that most people who have engaged in activities like that cannot describe adequately. And that's just the opening part, so to speak.
The first two chapters.
Yeah. So
you mentioned, Dr. Breck, you've said this before, that the working man in him, and also the sort of tramp, a sort of character that's largely disappeared. The guy that joins a cult, and then perhaps he does, he travels into, he jumps state to state and picks up odd jobs, working man jobs, heavy machinery, that kind of stuff. They don't often write, correct?
exactly.
Yeah. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I've met many of these people. You saw some of them in the 90s. They really don't exist. I say they don't exist. I'm sure they exist anymore today, but they're so busy living life, they don't have I wouldn't say use the term inner monologue, but they don't have a desire to write, or keep diaries or notes, or provide a chronicle, or a memoir, or any kind of leave behind any kind of literary record of their comings and goings. And on top of that, a lot of them are very interested, usually in drugs or narcotics or what have you, and this turns them off. But it's significant that while McCloud was into narcotics, it didn't affect or impact negatively his ability to remember things or record them.
And I would say differently, the people now are busy existing. They're not busy living life.
And he lived a lot of it, didn't he?
He lived and existed. There's a difference.
Yeah, he wanted to live life. That was his goal. I've met a lot of people like that, and honestly, it's never been one of my goals, because it seemed like a lot of work. And that's the downside. And we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I'm going to say some of the most disappointing deals to him was having progressed thus far in life and then losing everything again, which was, I think, the impetus for his final actions. But, he thought, yeah, I have come all this way. I've gotten this book. It's all up. It's all downhill from here, only to find himself rolling the ball. Who was it, Sisyphus, or had to roll the boulder uphill, then he finds himself back to work, pushing the boulder back uphill. So that was a crushing blow to him, no doubt. And, the impetus for, as I said, for some of his final decisions behind his demise.
Right. Yeah. And I've heard it said, he stated that it was a recurrent theme in his life where he builds something only to have it either hijacked and I don't, to be fair, I don't know all the details pertaining. I don't think any of us really do. How much of it is fiction versus truth? And that's really the mystique behind Sanction, I think, because he blurs he blurs fantasy with his lived experience. And so one can only speculate. He does seem to have been a self-sabotager. He does seem to have crossed other people as well. So, I don't want to paint him all in that, just that, as an historian and an archivist, and in hearing, kind of a variety of perspectives on the matter, he was screwed, and he also screwed other people, perhaps. I don't know. Am I too emboldened to suggest as much? I'm just going off of the data presented to us.
I think he makes that very clear in the book, or at least in the ensuing volumes, that he was no angel himself. But let me add that McCloud represents, in many ways, the American archetype of the pioneer man. Daniel Boone ended up with no property. Daniel Boone couldn't keep any property.
Right.
Davy Crockett had to go to Texas. There's Jack Hayes, the famous not founder, but one of the original Texas Rangers, had to leave Texas. I'm just saying there's a whole litany of American folklore heroes, of guys who just couldn't keep it together.
How about Ulysses Grant? That's a good one.
Yeah, he got lucky at the end, but
yeah,
most of these guys, I would put him in that category, but most of these guys didn't have a second act like he did. And so they just, it was all downhill for them.
Okay, I'm going to back us up, and I'm going to talk to the person that we want to read this book.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to say, this is an easy book to give up on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's an easy book to give up on. And I'm going to encourage that you don't give up on it. Okay. And the way I read this book, and I take a very intellectual approach to reading books. I read books for enjoyment. And so I'm going to be honest. I read 3 or 4 chapters of this book, and I got the feel for how he writes. Okay.
Yeah.
Did not comprehend a damn thing. And then I started, once I understood how he wrote, the back and forth in time.
Yes.
The cadence he took. Once I understood how that worked, I started over.
Yes. You lose a lot in the mix, don't you?
Yeah, you kind of have to understand how he writes before you have a hope, for me anyway, before you have a hope of comprehending anything he's saying.
I would wonder if McClay himself would he'd often reference his Sanction as a mind virus. He'd chuckle about it in interviews. I find the interviews to add so much context to his work as well. It ought to be collated and maybe thematically analyzed. I might just do that. But one of those things that he mentioned is it's a mind virus that seeps into you. Yeah, so maybe what you're describing is that very thing. I certainly felt I've said this to y'all. I find it's a bully of a book.
It
You
is.
know, it's a bully. It will bully you around. It will dominate your reading schedule to the point where there were points I had to put it down. And actually, I have been on a hiatus from Sanction 2 because, quite frankly, reading it every day, it has an effect on a profound effect on you.
Yeah.
And it might be different from person to person, but for me, it was like, this book is it's very potent, and it's also, there's a lot of it I don't agree with. There's a lot of it that I adamantly reject, but I still see the beauty in it. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying this is some sort of virtue signal to distance myself from him. He and I are very different people, but as a lover of good literature, I can accept the author's vantage point. And while I might vehemently, just oppose of some philosophies contained there, and there's also stuff that it rings very true, and it's very ugly.
And like I said, I'm reading it strictly for a lover of true sci-fi entertainment value.
Yeah.
That's how I'm approaching these books.
So I want to qualify a couple things she's saying for the reader, for the potential reader. One is that reading is for the modern era, especially for people not used to it, with the reading comprehension of a third grader, which was most people. No offense to the listener, in theory, but you have to build your reading muscles. And she had worked her way through some fairly good sized Robert Jordan. You read Robert Jordan.
Yes.
And she had built up her muscles of development for comprehension and reading to work Sanction. Now, I also want to briefly object. I want to briefly not object, but explain, in my opinion, why Sanction was written the way it was written. You said he described it as a mind virus, Mr. Wright, and to me, he wrote it in a jumbled fashion because every day was a new day and the transmission was not in order. So he had to put it down as it came out. And so the narrative is not in order. Things jump around immensely. You are just okay. The beginning, I imagine, I was thinking about it from the perspective of a filmmaker today. And, that narration in the beginning, the introduction to the book as the camera pans, followed by the scene of the oil fields, that intense scene. And then we jump to something completely, and I'm not giving away spoilers. I'm just saying that there's a massive leap that makes no direct sense or connection.
Way in the future. Yes. Yeah. New characters. Yeah.
And this is why it's a bully, and it throws you for a loop, and it's hard to read. But again, it's the way it is right now. Maybe in the future it'll be edited differently. I don't know, but this is the way he wrote it because that's the way it was transmitted, in my opinion.
Yeah. I almost wonder, I've thought about this before, maybe someone with enough time on their hands and an inclination to do so ought to map out a timeline of these books in some visual terms where one can, if they're so, if they'd be able to see kind of how the whole thing pans out, because, like y'all said, you jump across time periods and you might go way to the, like in in the Time Machine, H.G. Wells' Time Machine, he jumps all the way to the end of time, right? Well, Sanction will take you to the end of time in book one somewhere, nestled somewhere, and then he'll take you back to Lyndon's teenage years, and then he'll take you to these two quirky embodied AIs walking around some secret squirrel facility, and it's just it really, it's a very for me, I've heard it said, who is it that said it? There's another author out there, but so I'm not claiming this, but he said something like he's convinced that this book can only have been written by Roman McClay, and at this time, it's a book for this time, and you'll never see another one of it.
I agree.
Yeah,
I really do. I think this is at that moment, at that time, only by him, what once in a lifetime book. I have the hiccups. I'm sorry. And it's one of those things that if you give it a chance and you don't quit on it, I think it will become your favorite, one of your favorite literary works. And
yeah,
but it is a commitment. And it's a commitment that you either stick with or you don't. But like I said, I would encourage any reader out there. It's very easy to give up on these books. Very, because it's very confusing. But
it's also. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would just encourage anybody that wants to try to read them until you understand the flow, and then start over, because that's the only way I started to comprehend the content. I had to read it until I understood the back and forth in time.
Yes. I found that it was very, there's points where it's very crudely written, especially in the first book. You know, you're going to find grammatical errors. You're going to find a roughness to it, but I think it also speaks to the character of the author, where he's a crude guy with oil on his hands, and rough and just, kind of, he's he's a gruff dude, and he's dirty, and so is so are the books.
And I appreciate that. I don't want a grammatically perfect book in front of me.
Right.
I don't care.
Right.
I could care less about that. I want a book that sucks me in so deeply that if I'm reading it and I look up at a clock and 3 hours has passed, I don't care.
Right. And you definitely get sucked into that world, don't you? I know I did, where I'm like, how do people not know about Jack 4 and blacks? And I mean, these characters they've got so much depth to them.
And who would ever think that concrete walls could be beautiful?
Yeah, exactly. A shipping container on the top of a mountain in nowhere, Colorado. Just yeah.
One of the things I was going to talk about as well from that perspective is it's a commitment like climbing Everest.
Yeah.
But it's also, I would compare it to reading the Quran, in the sense of people would ask me, what is it like if I were to compare it to other difficult books? The Quran is also kind of a jumble. And I'm sure there's other things, but the Quran comes to mind right off the bat as a hard book to read.
Moby Dick.
Moby Dick was a hard book to read, but to me, it was in the tradition of American big books, and it wasn't. But I spent years reading it. I didn't try to read it all at once.
I'm the oddball that likes the chapter 32. What is it? The cetology or where it's just all about whales and but I'm the Linnaean here that likes taxonomies and nerd, like
That was my favorite
so.
chapter of the book.
She likes whales.
No, I liked that it had a purpose.
Well, it was kind of explained, and James LaFon does similar things in his books where he has these notes and asides. But to me, if you read Moby Dick in the context of the literature of its time, like Fenimore Cooper, I brought up the Deerslayer before, it makes more sense. And books like that, there were people wrote big books like that, and it was not. I'm not saying the Deerslayer necessarily compares to Moby Dick. I'm just saying it is a similar volume written in a similar fashion, and they wrote books like that back then. Yes, Moby Dick stands on its own, but it's also a product of its time as well.
I'll be honest. And I don't know, I don't think this is recency bias, but James LaFon's Sunset Saga gets into a lot of clones and there's a lot of terrain there. It's a totally different vibe, but there's a lot of similarities, and James will touch on this stuff, very similar terrain as to, that McClay had tread with AI and clones, and it's just very interesting to see that. And I wish they would have met, frankly. I think James would have, perhaps been a good mentor for him, but it's one of those coulda, woulda, shoulda sort of deals. And I know you and I have talked about that before. I don't know if that's kind of detouring off, but that's.
You suggested a dramatization of that, and I think that would be great. And I hope you might do something on those lines eventually. But it would be even better if you even use their clones or something.
That's fun. I hadn't even thought about that.
Something like that, But I'm just saying, I really hope you'll do something. I would almost be tempted to do something, but that is your brainchild.
Pretty good idea, huh?
Yeah, it is a good idea. If I were younger, I would. I would definitely try to steal that.
We'll have to figure out a way to blow up the text in such a fashion that James can get in on this, because I'll often find that when I talk with him, sometimes Sanction comes up and he just doesn't know what it is. He just knows that you and I are. In fact, well, actually, maybe we should have mentioned this. You and I met over Sanction. The three of us, we met over Sanction. That's how I knew, how I found you, and then. And then you introduced me to James, who introduced me to Carter Obrock. There's all these people that sort of are in a similar orbit, just in terms of interests that are certainly not mainstream. And I find that just so. I love that about. In fact, well, look at this. I just saw this. Okay, as an aside, check out on the cover. Look at the little whale there. You see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's everywhere, right? But anyways, I don't know what I was getting at. Just that
well, to me, like, the cover is like I don't know, it's like an Indian, Native American little mishmash of medicine, like a medicine deal to me, not a medicine wheel, but like a medicine. No, well, what they lay out on the ground,
Oh,
yeah.
I can't think of the term, and that's what it reminded me of when I first saw it. The whale, they'll have all these little objects grouped together with maybe a circle around them on the ground.
I'll say McClay was a visual artist through and through, and I think that's what gave his books the inertia to even be considered. Would you say that's because he really did know how to sell this book? He really did know how to visually, he tapped into a sort of masculine energy that's been for so long denied. And actually, his book, it's a very there's that's a common, I guess that's like the sort of at the center of it is just this, what is it? Pain deserves a response is how it opens. Absolutely genius, right? Pain deserves a response, right? And there's also this, well, and we see the dark side of that too, but all throughout, it's this idea that men in societies, particularly Western societies, those men with masculine traits and attributes and sort of the social order, the code among men has been tamped down by modernity, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that was that's what interested a number of factions of folks online, a number of different kinds of audiences. But it didn't end there. Just like with James LaFond, how he's got his ecosystem of authors that are quite disparate. You've got your boxers and martial artists. You've got your science fiction people. We're a small number, but they're there. And then you've got your kind of gray hat academics. They're kind of they're hip to the realities of the history that we've been denied. So that's a faction of readers, and so too with McClay. There's quite the intellectual sorts that gravitated around this book. Other authors.
Yeah, and we want to have some of them on, and we'll talk about them. And I also want to have Carter O'Brock on.
Yeah, I'm just getting into him, and I'm really liking his. I wish I had it near me. It's his newest novella. It's good stuff. I'm going to do a review about it in the coming days, in fact.
But with regard to Sanction is a very physical book. If you are going to get wrapped up into the beginning scene when he is on the rig doing all the things he's doing to manage the oil flow or what have you, it's a very dramatic scene. It's going to engross you, and then you jump into the future, and then you jump to these other points in time.
It was that the first chapter where he's on the oil rig and it's very kinetic. There's a lot going on. He's getting beat up and he's getting, he's like, getting torn apart with this thing and on the rig. And then he gets chewed out by some Poindexter project manager, from corporate and just wanting to, strangle the guy. Right. I think it's the perfect way to start the book out. It sets a good tempo, but it also, I'm thinking of like movies like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, how it starts with that whole train scene and it's just very action oriented and it just pulls you in. It's like that,
No, it really is. If you, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing, any reader, and I would encourage everybody, again, don't give up on the book, but you do have to open your mind. You can't take into it your preconceived notions of right and wrong.
Yeah.
And especially the further you get into the book, you have to open your mind and just read.
Well, it's in a sense, in essence, I said essence.
Essence, you mean, yes.
It is in essence a meditation amongst the AI types or androids or what have you about morality and about philosophy of mankind because they're learning about humanity.
Well,
so it's a meditation.
As you get further towards the end of book 1 and move into book 2, there are pieces of it that are going to grate against your opinion of right and wrong.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's literally what was on. It's funny. That's literally what was on my mind. So I really want to talk about this with y'all. If that very thing, Leanna, that you mentioned, I'm a Christian, right? You know, and I know you guys are believers as well. I was really challenged with these books. I can't get behind a good deal of it. And there were times where I felt conviction, where I'm like, should I even be reading this?
Yes, I'm there right now.
Yeah. And I want to ask, like, how do you get through that? Because part of me was like, you know, there were even times where I was reading this book day after day, and then the Bible kind of got put to the side, and boy, did that really hurt me. You know, that I don't know. I don't mean to, like, what is it? Make it too overly theatric, but how did you deal with that?
Okay, so I am a very task-oriented person. I literally read Sanction for a specific amount of time every day.
Yeah.
I read my Bible for a specific amount of time every day.
Yeah.
And I do the Bible first.
Yeah.
And there are parts of Sanction that so go against everything I believe. But the way I have approached it is, how do I know that he didn't write this book as his way of confession and repentance?
Yes.
I don't know what was in his mind. And
right.
So and again, it's not my place to judge either.
Right.
And so I'm reading the book for entertainment value, not to judge. So I do feel some guilt at some points of the book when I'm reading it. But then I just, God let the book be put in my hands. And if he didn't want me to read it, he wouldn't have let me find it. I actually do believe that. And so I have told myself, whether I'm lying to myself or not, I honestly couldn't tell you. But I have told myself that maybe this book was his book of repentance.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's also the discernment piece where, if you have the armor of God, you're able to pick out what resonates with you spiritually versus what doesn't. I'll be honest, he gets into he affords a great deal of respect for the Bible in various places, the King James at that, and the Old Testament primarily. He's really into the Old Testament. Book of Job comes up a lot. That's another thing he and James LaFon perhaps shares. But what I find too is, there's the idea of being spoiled by philosophy, right? There's that biblical concept by man-made philosophy. And I think I saw this evolution in him as a writer where he was distant, but then he would kind of creep close, get closer, and he would wrestle with the Bible, he would wrestle with some of the ideas, and he'd get closer and then kind of back away, and then he would sort of supplant different ideas with his own philosophies, which is where I really had a problem, right? But nevertheless, who hasn't? I myself have I get it wrong often, and I pray to the Lord for repentance, I repent and I pray for forgiveness and the ability to rightly divide the word and get it right the next time, and so I think if I do think you can get into literature that is at odds with your faith, provided that you do what Leanna's talking about, which is put God first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel that a lot of this is addressed more thoroughly in the third volume.
I haven't
And
read that yet.
I know you haven't. But I think even more so, the unedited parts of the book would have even a better explanation of his motives and true feelings that we may hope to obtain at some point.
Yeah.
So that's my perspective on the content on volume 1. But in terms of coming up with this and imagining what I feel like is this guy is dealing with these AI characters and his ability to describe them and their dialogue and their actions is impeccable.
It is.
I agree.
You think about what it's like to be embodied AI, and he really does an impeccable job of describing that and describing them and how they act and so on and so forth and all that.
And he also puts
Aspects.
in there that they have conflicts too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
And I feel like in volume 3, their conflicts, especially with the religious areas, demonstrate his real opinions on a lot of things.
Interesting. You know, so these characters are they are visages of Roman McClay, of the author. You know, Black's is the more, you know, do the right thing type. Still he's got a bite to him, but and then you've got the Jacks, Jack 1 through 4, whom, you know, Jack 3, I believe, is more of the creative spirit, right? Jack 4 is the burn it all down, right? Guy. And then you have the AIs, Isaiah and Mo, and they're very different. And Isaiah, they're very different. Mo is like the prototypical AI, you know, the first kind of the first one to come on the scene, and he's more analytical and you know, number cruncher, and he can operate all these systems remotely, just a super powered, you know, sort of being. And then you have Isaiah, which is the more realized and humanistic embodied AI. And they often are in conflict. And I sort of get the sense, I'm not through the whole series, but I get the sense that there's this ramping up of differences that's going to come to a head, perhaps.
Yeah, I definitely feel that was the case. And like I said, this goes back to when he did, insofar as he did plan his plot, I feel like McLeod planned fairly tightly. You know, and that, you know, build up between the two, you know, over the course of the books in their dialogue, you know what I mean? And an example of him developing something over the period of the books. So
let me ask you all this. So I've only encountered this with one other author, Robert A. Heinlein, in that when Heinlein talked about, say, propulsion systems and nuclear power, you know, and all these different, you know, and like star fleets and the mechanics behind it and the science, he knew what he was talking about. Even if he got stuff wrong, boy, he was convincing. And McClay does this effortlessly with the neurology, the neurological sciences, you know, the the archetypical sort of psychology, you know, all these sort of disciplines, he was able to speak to it so effortlessly, and it was dense stuff. And it's like the man wrote 14 hours a day supposedly, and he did this for 10 months. How is it feasible that somebody can pack in these treatises? I believe it was John Solomon Bain. He was he might be a defunct blogger now, but he wrote about McClay. And he had mentioned that McClay's a better essayist than he is a fiction author. I'm not sure about that, but myself, but the point still stands that this book is it's primed with these sort of scientific, quasi-scientific psychology, myth, you know, these treatises, and he does it in a very convincing way that connects directly with the plot. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think McLeod was what was known as a quick study and was able to assimilate large chunks of knowledge very quickly. And I think part of the proof of this is his varied life and he was a jack of many trades, maybe not all trades, and that is the word I was looking for previously, which you don't really see anymore in society, is these men who are jacks of all trades.
Yes.
McLeod was very much that type of individual, but it seemed like he was good at many things, and he got good at them fairly quickly.
So I'm going to add something that's very unpopular. If you speak about something that 99% of the population doesn't understand, and they don't care to, but you speak about it with authority, nobody fact checks you. They just take you at your word.
Yeah.
Yes,
there was
Go ahead. Go ahead.
There was a bit of a con man. There was a bit of a con man in him, so maybe that comes out. But then also, and I don't mean to malign who he was. I have a lot of respect for him, you know, in a lot of ways. But I also see him as a flawed character, as we all are. But then there's also what was it? Oh goodness, I'm having a boomer moment. So there's that, but then McClay himself also mentions in interviews he's humble about it. He'll say, "Hey, I probably got a lot of stuff wrong, but you know, hey, it's just hopefully I got some of it right. Hopefully I weaved a good story, you know." And he admits that he was flying off the seat of his pants for some of these treatises, these scientific treatises embedded in the work, and that he did his best. And you know, you gotta give a guy props for admitting that you know, the limits of his knowledge base. And the other thing I wanted to say is that he mentioned something in one of his interviews that he attributes it to an author, and I can't think of the name. It could be Hunter S. Thompson. I really got to track it down because I want to know. But it's the notion that there's two different kinds of authors. There's the author that writes while they're living life, and then there's the author that lives a full life, and then in the latter years or later on in life, now they're ready to write their book, you know. And that's what he did. And like you said, Dr. Breck, he just takes in all this wealth of information over the decades. He is a jack of all trades, so he knows a lot of things, and it's just common sense. He's able to then dictate that onto the page.
Well, I think he was definitely a reader of Steve Saylor, and I haven't seen anything specifically that I found. Not that I'm an expert, but I generally am good at spotting small errors But in any case, I haven't found any egregious errors in his science.
Let's see, here's where I'm different though. I am reading this book for entertainment. I don't care if every single thing he writes in there is BS.
Right.
I really
Yes.
don't. I don't care if everything he wrote in there is just words to make it interesting. Because the fact of the matter is, it's good. I don't care if there's a bit of truth in it.
Why would we hold our present writers to a higher standard than Jules Verne and the the imaginative?
The Earth is a beautiful story. It's wonderful. Why would I care if anything in it's true?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I love that. That's a great way of just putting it all together there.
He's letting me lose myself in another world. Why would I care how much of it's true?
Yeah.
And that's a really good summary for the reader. And there's a lot to absorb. The books are very, not just because of, and I disagree with the guy saying he was a better essayist, because I don't think he was much of an essayist. I think the fact that he was able to put these pieces of these texts, these essays, basically into the fiction is what made it good. Stand alone, it would not have done very well, but it stands up as it is, very well.
Yes.
But the point is, what was the word I used before? Just before
Jack of all trades? Was that it? No.
I'm sorry, but I lost it. But the just who he was able to convey a lot of information as part of the plot, and necessarily being part of the plot, not just incidentally being part of the plot. Like, you needed to know everything he tells you to make sense of the interactions between the clones and between the AI.
Yes. Yeah, right. He gives just a sufficient level of detail that scratches the itch that legitimizes the world in which these characters reside.
Right. Now, I will say, I do not know much about him, the writer, as a person. I know his act. I have not dug much into it, and I don't care. I pray for his soul like I would anyone's, but I haven't dug into much about who he is. Now, when I'm finished with the book, I very well probably will, but I don't want that to taint how I read the book.
I think that, go ahead.
Give the book the respect it deserves, because he was living when he wrote it.
Yeah.
I don't want how he ended his life to taint how I approach the book.
I think that's very reasonable.
I think I'm the kind of person that probably would let it.
And to Mr. Wright's point related to that, he was the guy that wrote about life as he lived it, rather than writing about life in retrospect. And that is a very brave form of writing, because you are recording yourself being buffeted and, assaulted by the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, to quote the Shakespearean deal, rather than writing it all down in the benefit of hindsight from a safe place. So he chose a very difficult way of writing. And I believe that more than anything else did him in.
Aren't the best authors the ones that are complex? I mean, really, like
Absolutely.
largely, and you'd be hard pressed to find one of the great works, um, written by somebody who wasn't deeply complex. There, you like pick your poison, right? So to suggest that McClay is some sort of a miscreant, like some sort of an exception to the rule, and that these authors of the past are just angels, that's I think that's preposterous. In fact, great efforts have been made to hide the fallen nature of the beloved authors that we all hold dear. But you look close enough, and you'll find that we're all mad here, to quote one Lewis Carroll, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's a good wrap up point as we're at an hour, but I think that was a good summary, Mr. Wright. And maybe we have not stated an effective case for people to read Sanction, but hopefully we have piqued their interest enough to look into it a little bit and perhaps dip their feet in the water of the book and determine whether they like it or not. And this is something you can obtain Sanction on the Wayback Machine if you don't want to pay $600 for a soft copy, not even a hard copy, for a paperback. But hopefully it will be available to the public in the near future in all its 3-volume glory.
Yeah.
And so that's a goal of ours in the near future.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for you're the guiding light behind this whole deal, because while I was interested in proceeding with Sanction, I didn't think anybody else cared. So I know at least you and a couple other guys. You mentioned the one guy who moved to Substack. What was his name? He had 3 names.
John Solomon Bain.
That's him. Yeah. And so you could tell from his review of the book that he'd actually read the book.
It makes it all the better to have others in your circle that read it or have read it, because it's very lonely, the state of being a sanctioned reader. Otherwise, you're on an island and nobody understands you, right? So much appreciation to both you, Dr. Breck, and Leanna, sincerely, to open these dialogues, and hopefully we bring others in to kind of pick apart the work and and analyze it and ensure that it's preserved for future readers.
I would love that.
Well, when do we want to do volume 2? Are you done with volume 2? Are you on volume 3?
No, unfortunately, I'm on chapter 4, and I've been on a hiatus since, so it's going to take me some time. But
okay,
maybe we could do maybe some in between sort of content, and then maybe once we're all caught up, I'm not sure, or we can do a book club. I don't know, whatever you want to do.
I'm on page 272, whatever chapter that is. So
yeah, that's about where I'm at. I think something like that.
Same place.
Yeah, it's a monstrous mountain to climb, but it is definitely doable. And I think the book, his writing definitely improves in the 2nd and 3rd volume.
Oh, yes.
Big time.
That the longer you write, the better you become. And the best piece of writing advice, as I told you, is that I have ever gotten was you got to write 1,000,000 words. So he took care of that in the first book, and he was able to write more effectively, in my opinion, in the 2nd and 3rd.
I think the visuality got better. The you could see what he was meaning to tell you better, literally page by page.
I think he was more comfortable with the characters as well, and there was a greater coherence,
Yes.
and there was closure to some threads that the first book initiated.
Open, yeah.
Well,
I agree.
we appreciate the you working with us, Mr. Wright, on this, and we hope to have some really big announcements coming on Sanction in the near future. And we encourage the reader to go out and do that and look for future broadcasts any day now on the subject. So I'm going to shut her down for tonight, and we'll talk to you on the other side.